right, here we go. We're back for another episode. Deb is not here tonight, but that's all right because we have more than enough energy, more than enough motivation to make up for everything that Deb is missing out on. We got Josiah Greer. He is an entrepreneur, he is a speaker, and he is also the host of the IIV League Podcast. What's going on, man?
What's going on? I don't know, man. Now you done set the expectations high that I gotta come with a lot of energy, man.
Hey man, I would only say it because I know it's true. I've
That's
been
real.
around you enough times to know that, man. Any room you're in, any space, whether it be a podcast, whether it be a studio, recording a motivational cipher, whatever it is, man. You always bring the energy. So I
That's
say that
love.
with full confidence, to you, man.
That's love. Thank you, man. I
Yeah,
appreciate you.
man. Hey, well, this has been a long time coming, man. I knew I wanted to have you on the podcast at some point. You and I have podcasted together when I was doing the
Yes.
Character Combine podcast, and
Mhm.
uh, it's funny. That's actually how we're connected. It kind of ties into how we're connected because I always like to start this show off because it's called Connectable,
Yeah.
and we try to get our guests connected with our audience connected with our guests, and then hopefully everybody a little bit more connected to each other. And so when we start the show with a new guest, I always like to explain, okay, how are we connected? And for you and I, so my first experience with you was actually through Kevin, our friend Kevin Bracey, Coach Greatness, and
Yes.
been a friend of mine for quite a few years now. I know he's been a friend of yours for quite a few years. And the first time I ever saw you speak was at the Kevin Bracey's Kevin Bracey at the Crest, where he did
Yes.
his whole show, and he had a contest for aspiring motivational speakers, and it was like a one-on-one, almost like if anybody's familiar with like a hip hop battle, like underground hip hop battle. It was kind of the same thing, one verse one, but instead of trying to tear the person down, it was building the person up with motivational words. And you were the champ, man. You won, just killed it. And so that was my first experience seeing you speak. And then from there on out, you did a podcast with us. Then I've been involved with some projects that you and Kevin have done since then as well. So it's always cool, man, just to be around you. Because like I said, you do just have a ton of positivity about you. You just have a good vibe about you. And so I'm like, yeah, we definitely need to share this with our audience for sure. So anyways, man, that's how we're connected through Kevin Bracey and some other things. But man,
Yeah,
it's good to have you on the show for sure.
man. It's a blessing to be here, and I think greatness recognizes greatness. You know what I mean? And it's one of those things where like it's almost like you almost have to at some point continuously connect with other people that are also doing great things as well, because it's like, I see what you're doing, I'm like, oh yeah, I can't wait to be a part of that, you know what I mean? Or when we, the times that we have come together, it's just been like an amazing experience each time. So I'm thankful as well just to get the opportunity to be on here, because I do watch it. I've seen a couple of episodes with different people, and I just think that the work that you're doing, being able to dive into what people are doing, but also how they're being connected to you and other people, and helping really push the conversation forward in that sense, I think is necessary, because there's no one person that became successful on their own. It always takes someone else. And so I think you being able to highlight that is really important.
Awesome, man. I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, that's our whole goal here is we love what, so many people are doing awesome things, and we want to, share what you guys are doing with the world because it needs to be shared. Like you said, the more connected we are, the more likely you are to run into a person who is great or is doing great things. And then hopefully that helps build up with what you're doing. And speaking of which, man, we actually have a common connection in Farouk as well, the
Wow.
owner
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
Abas Clothing.
Right.
That was last year, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Really cool dude. Love what he's doing. In fact, I commented on something of his. I'm like, we got to get him back on too because it was a good conversation with him. But all the stuff he's doing with his clothing brand is pretty dope. But I don't know if he had you or you were on his show first, and then he
Yeah.
came on ours.
I had him on ours.
That's what it
Yeah.
was. And I'm like, okay, because I know Kevin, he sent some clothes to Kevin. You had him on the show. I'm like, well, this dude must be a good dude, so we got to get him on
Yeah.
the show. So,
Yeah. Good.
yeah, man,
That's
all kinds
good.
of cool connections. Dwight Taylor Senior as
Yeah. I saw
well.
that episode as well too. That was nice. That was
Yeah,
nice.
thanks, man. Yeah, it's like I said, man, we're connected to a lot of good people, and that's a good feeling. But I want to talk. We're gonna get more into what you do and all that stuff. But I have to say,
Mhm.
man, when I listen to your podcast or when I watch your podcast, first of all, you have a decent amount of people on that podcast, which I'm like, that's a bold move. That's brave.
It's tough.
I was gonna say, and it's like a lot of energy in that room too. So good for you, man. I'm like, I don't think I'd be bold enough to do it. I don't think I have the voice to like wrangle everybody in when
Yes.
the a topic really starts getting people fired up. But the thing about you, man, is that you do have like, it seems like you have a big following, not just on social media, but just in general, man. Like it seems like you are a leader of people.
Mhm.
Like, do you feel
Mhm.
that way, or do you feel that responsibility as you kind of navigate throughout life?
I think that I do feel it naturally, and also I think it's just because of my upbringing. My mom was in the church. She's a pastor. My brother's a pastor, but my mom has always spoke life into me and spoke positivity into me, and then I moved around a lot, as a kid, and so I always had to constantly stand out because I was always new. So I just had to realize that, listen, you have to just be yourself, and things happen, and whoever likes it likes it, whoever doesn't. But it took me a while to get to that point. And so now I'm in a position where, me being older, I'm comfortable in who I am, and I'm able to just be me. And I've been blessed that um I think it's important to be me, but also be kind to others in the best way possible, and as good as possible. And then, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, as they said, the golden rule. And so I've tried to treat people with respect and kindness and genuine, authenticity, and really just to try to help in any way, because we don't know how our lives are going to impact other people in any sort of way. And so life is hard, and so I just try to do the best that I can to help people. And over time, it's resulted in me looking like to what people would call a leader. I felt it, but I don't like to self-proclaim that, because at any point it's up to people to follow you. You know what I mean? And so
Right.
if I'm like, oh, I'm the leader, then and the people who do follow me in whatever capacity say, oh, never mind, then I'm a leader of what? A leader of nothing. And so I don't try to self-proclaim it, but I do understand the responsibility that comes with that. And that's, I think, why I've tried to shift my vision into going more into positivity and things like that. And that's ultimately what kept me into contact with people like Kevin Bracey, like Dwight Taylor Sr., and like yourself.
Yeah, man. I like what you said too, man. I think I don't know about you, man. I don't trust anybody who self proclaims that they're the leader. If they're constantly doing that, I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
Like, I don't know if I can
You
trust
might
you.
not be the leader at all.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know. You may see yourself that way, but everybody else is rolling their eyes. So like, this is not
Right.
the leader. But I think that's true, man. Like, I think a true leader of anything, like people just know, right? Like they
Mhm.
walk into a room, they're navigating through that situation or through that room and around those people, and people can just tell. And without even saying anything, I think people tend to gravitate towards those people. And
Mhm.
so, and I think without even saying it, like you said, they're not proclaiming it, but they do understand the responsibility without anybody even saying, "Hey, you're our leader." They can feel it, and there's that sense of responsibility that they've got to take this thing seriously because
Right.
a lot of eyes are on them, especially with you being a speaker. It definitely kind of amps up the responsibility too, because now it's not just people are watching you; now they're listening to you, every word you're saying, and you're motivating. So now it puts more pressure on the way you live your life, right? Like everything you're saying from the stage, that's always been a big thing of mine. Like the words we speak are only as powerful as the life that we lead. And if the
Mhm.
life, if those two things don't match up, then it's, you're not gonna get booked for speaking events, right? Because it's like, well, he sounds good on stage, he can speak well, but it's not genuine anymore.
Right.
So, I mean, do you feel that when you're speaking? Like, I mean, I can tell from when you're speaking, it comes from a genuine place, but like, has it always been like that, or did you have to learn how to be like how to find your voice on stage specifically?
I mean, I think that I did have to learn how to find it. Believe it or not, I had like huge stage fright when I was younger, but it started with me doing music with my older brother in church. We used to do like gospel rap, and I remember like just standing in one place and just nodding my head, and just like, what I mean, as I'm trying to like
Yeah.
say the lyrics. But in this, I've been doing this since I was like 9, 10 years old. But over time, I started to move around. Then I started to like go into the aisles a little bit, and so it took years of, they say, what, 10,000 hours,
Yeah.
to perfect a particular craft. And so I think that luckily for me, like my mom was in the church, she had me like, you're gonna speak, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do that, and that kind of forced me to develop that ability to be able to have the courage to get in front of people, because that's the number one fear in America is public speaking.
Right.
And so having that over time has really helped. And then As I'm getting older, I think now I'm starting to recognize the responsibility that comes with it and how I need to control, the way that the things that I do publicly and even in private in regards to the way that I speak on social media, the things that I post. And I really learned that from just observing the greats like Kevin Bracey, like Dwight Taylor Sr., like yourself, like Eric Thomas. Like I really pay attention to people and how they move on a day-to-day basis. I'm always asking questions like, me and KB, we talk probably every day, I want to say probably
Yeah.
like every day we talk, and Armani easily, like, I talk to people who are
Yeah.
doing a lot
Armani.
of different things and just to see like, okay, what's your perspective on this? What's your take on that? And it's, we're always learning. And so I think me having the ability to understand the responsibility it's still kind of new in regards to realizing how much power comes with what you say. So
Right.
I'm learning that.
Yeah. A quick side note. I'm pretty sure I reached out to Armani a little while ago and he never got back to me. Not a big deal. I don't want to call Armani out, but I wanted Armani on this podcast too. So
I got you. I'm gonna hit him up tonight. I got you. He gonna get
all right,
on.
man.
I promise you.
I'm gonna have to look back, make sure that's accurate. I reached out to one of his, he's got like 5 social media accounts. I'm
Yeah,
just saying,
he be moving. So
maybe I reached out to the wrong one. That might be on me, but either way, Armani, if you're listening, come on the show, man. You're doing a lot of dope stuff.
come on. We need the O. We need the Project Optimism.
That's what I'm saying. I want some optimism on this podcast. We have a lot of people, but like his whole thing is optimism. Plus he had a book. Yeah, it's got to happen. So like Armani, I don't want to call you out, but that's what I just did twice. So come on the show, man. So hey, it's funny. I didn't realize some of your family were pastors, and so I was going to ask you if that's where like this whole speaking thing came from. But then you also mentioned that you had stage fright. So it's interesting that your mom's like, no, you're gonna learn how to be comfortable in front of people. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So that my brother was just ordained, I think in 2021 or 2020, I want to say.
Okay.
And my mother was ordained back in 2016, I think, or 15.
Okay.
So it's still fairly new, but my mom was, in the church heavy. And so, she was a minister in the church for years. And so she was always like, you go and get up and, and my church was back in Richmond and it was, they was like, you talk Sunday school, you talk whatever, you go,
yeah.
So, but yeah, I had a huge stage fright, because I'm a real introverted extrovert, if that makes sense. So like there are certain times, like for instance, for my job, where I'm required to talk to people. And so, I'll do that because that's what I have to do. Or like public speaking, like I can do that. But if you just see me like chilling, like I don't mind being there's a whole room full of people and I'll just kind of sit in the corner and just chill and just observe, because that's how I learn from just watching and doing at the same time. So, but sometimes when I'm just quiet sitting there, I'm just learning. And so I had huge stage fright when I was a kid, and it just took time after time after time after time again to realize like it's not so bad if you mess up. Like it's not the end of the world. Like you just you keep going, and a lot of people think that like, what if I mess up? And after a while, I was just like, I've messed up a lot of times, and then I realized that the greats mess up all the time. But they still practice to try to make sure that they don't, and they minimize it, but they're so great that when they mess up, it's not even noticeable to the public because they're so great at catching it. And I think that's one of the things that helped me out is when I realized that I'm like, okay, so I can mess up and just keep it going. And sometimes it's okay to say, oh, I just messed up, but it's all right, and to play it off. It really helped.
Well, especially, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying about the authenticity too. Like when someone's up there and they're willing to own up to if they made a mistake, or if they're willing to look at themselves and their craft critically, I think people appreciate that. I think what people don't appreciate is the person who's up there and it makes it seem like they have no flaws, they have no mistakes, they're a perfect speaker, they're a perfect presenter, and it's like, I mean, we can tell you're not. It doesn't feel genuine. So I think there's something to that, man. I think some people really appreciate, even if they see a speaker that does great, make a small mess up, I think they appreciate that. And it's also funny too, when I think you hit a certain level, as you continue to climb up the ladder of whatever the craft is that you're doing, it is funny because you might think, man, I messed up 5 times during that speech. And everybody else is like, you killed it. That's the most perfect thing ever. But it's like, what are you talking about? But it's like, it just shows it's like, oh, okay, I've hit a different level because now I'm starting to see things. Like I'm sure Bracey, one of the best that I know. He probably walks away from certain talks he does and it's like, man, I messed up like 3 or 4 times, and the audience does, like, they're trying to contact him afterwards, like, hey, how do we book you for our event next? It's like, what? Like, these mistakes are just at a different level. So it's really cool once you hit those levels, those different levels, because the critique is just different, and it just shows you how far you've gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's funny. It's the whole introvert extrovert thing is interesting too, man, because I feel like I'm a similar way. I'm definitely more naturally introverted, but when I hop on a podcast, like, there's just no fear at all. I'm like, there probably should be
Man,
more
you
fear. It's
fooling
like,
me, man, because
yeah.
you be killing it, bro. You be killing
Thank
it.
you, man. I appreciate that. I mess up a lot. I'll tell you that. Every night I record, I tell my wife, like, I messed up. Like, this might be the worst podcast I've ever done. And then it always, like you said, it always turns out okay, though. You know what I mean? We're our own harshest critic. And especially with speaking, we actually, it's funny. My wife and I we saw Chappelle and Chris Rock last night.
How was that?
That was dope. It was dope.
I wanted to go so bad.
I've seen Chappelle. That was my third time seeing him live, and
Wow.
my first time seeing Chris Rock. And I tell people, like, Chappelle, it just never gets old. It never gets old.
Yeah.
And Chris Rock was incredible. He lived up to the hype as well. But I mean, to me, that's like the hardest type of entertainment. Stand-up comedy is the most difficult thing, but motivational speaking, you're not trying to necessarily make people laugh the entire time, but it's kind of a similar thing where you're trying to get a certain emotion out of the crowd. And if you don't get it, it's a terrible feeling. So, why did you, I mean, you had some stage right early on, like, what made you want to become a motivational speaker specifically? Because, I mean, it's one thing to be like, hey, I have stage fright, but I need to be okay at speaking. Like you said, for your job or just in any occasion in life, you may have to speak. So it's good to be comfortable with it. But motivational speaking, like, you're intentionally going out there trying to book speaking engagements to talk to people. Like, that's a different thing. Like, what made you want to do that?
I think it was really I want to say it wasn't until maybe like 2017 or 2018 maybe that I realized what motivational speaking actually was. Like I listened to like Eric Thomas's speech before. I used to run track in college, so I would listen to his speech of the guru who told the guy you want to be how bad do you want to be successful, right?
Right.
And so I had that, but I didn't know that that was motivational speaking. I just thought he just happened to have this story that he wanted to give somebody and he told this group of people, but I didn't know that that was motivational speaking. So I actually didn't even really know the idea until like I started looking up more, and I was listening to like Ray Lewis, and then I started listening more to ET, and I didn't even find out about Les Brown until 2018, I think.
Really?
So yeah, I had no idea who this dude was. So
Yeah.
because I remember, and it was actually Dwight Taylor Sr. who introduced me to him, because when he was doing a presentation and he clicked on the photo and he's like, "Who is this?" And everybody's like, "Les Brown." I'm like, "Who's Les Brown?" You know what I'm saying? So I didn't understand that this was something, because I think I just always took it as they were just given a message, and that could just be my, me being desensitized to like the church and the pastor giving a message and things like that. So I think I just kind of took it as they were just giving a message. I didn't even know that this alley existed until 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago. And so when I did that, I was like, this is something that I can do, because I've always, like I said, I understand, looking back at it now, 2020 vision, I can see little moments where I was the motivation for a particular group of people. Like, for instance, my freshman year in high school, I played basketball. And I remember like our coach was like at halftime, he was like, "Yo, y'all suck. Like, y'all need to get some energy. Y'all are like, come on." And I just started chanting, and we rallied behind it and won. You know what I'm saying? Like the whole team, I just started chanting in the locker room, like, "Who are we?" Was like, "We Warriors. Like let's go." Getting us all hyped. Like, those are little moments that I can see now looking back on it, like, yo, what you were doing was getting everybody motivated to go out there and put in work. And so, and there are other times, little instances like that, that I could say, okay, this is where you can excel in if you choose to go at it full force. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, it's just a blessing, kind of one of those things where like I naturally feel like that's what I'm called to do. Like, that's my calling. Like that, that's kind of my purpose, is to help people utilize my voice to help people, become their best self.
Yeah. Let me ask you this: what would you prefer as a speaker and someone who's done it for a little while now? What would you prefer to do? A 5 minute speech or a 45-minute speech?
45.
100%, man.
Yeah.
Five. It's funny because as someone who had stage fright, like when you're going through high school, college, you have to do presentations. They're like, okay, you have a 5 minute speech. It's the most terrifying thing ever. Once you start speaking, though, 5 minutes becomes the most terrifying thing ever, for a different reason. Because 5 minutes is nothing.
It's nothing.
But I mean, for the speaking competition you did, how much time was that?
3 minutes.
Which is worse.
Yes.
Whew.
Yes.
And you had to have multiple. I always like to tell people, because it's not like you just did the same speech over and over. You had to have how many speeches prepared?
I did two, or was it three? I think it might have been two or three. I can't remember exactly, but I know it was at least two.
And they were both 3 minutes.
They were both 3 minutes each.
Dang. That's brutal. It's brutal.
and the thing about it, which I really appreciate about that contest, is that we did not know who was going to be selected to speak until everybody else knew. So you had to come prepared, like, to speak, not even knowing if your name was going to be called. So everybody had kind of like the same platform, because we didn't know if our names were going to be called or if we were just kind of sitting in the audience. So I appreciate that, because it wasn't like everybody, even though we heard about this event, nobody could say, hey, I'm speaking at this, come, come buy a ticket to support me. It was come support this event for KB. And that's the way I promoted it. I never said that I'm speaking at this thing. I say, come support this. It's for a good cause and such and such. And then the day of, at the event, while we're there, when they say, here's who's speaking, and the audience found out, that's when I knew I was there.
That's crazy. Well, and I know we talked about this before when we did our last podcast together, but one thing that you just said that made me think about that whole situation. I mean, it's a crazy situation to begin with, right? You have to be prepared with two speeches. They're only 3 minutes, which is really a really fast amount of time. But because you didn't know going into it, when your name's called to say, hey, these are the 4 finalists, you have to also, it's like mentally, there's like a toughness thing that has to kick in too. And luckily maybe your athletic background played a part, but there's all that hype and excitement. Like I'm one of the top 4, but then you have to immediately go into, okay, now I have to compete. Was that a weird feeling, going from all the excitement down to, okay, now it's time to go?
To be honest, I think that for me, because the way I treat speaking, it wasn't like, although don't get me wrong, it's like I want to be the number one speaker in the world. I'm gonna be. Give me about 20 years, I'm gonna be the number one speaker in the world.
There you go. I like it.
But for me, I think I just treated it more as if it's, I'm just coming with a message. If the people receive the message from me and they feel like it resonated with them the most, then that's great. But if they don't, my message is still my message, and so that's the whole purpose that I kind of came with. The way I felt was like, if I just don't mess up, everything will be fine. Like if I go hard. And the funny thing is, I actually did mess up in the final speech. I messed up for sure. I said, there was at the end of it, and I know because I just rewatched the video like a couple weeks ago. I said that scared straight as opposed to scared great.
Oh, sure.
You know what I'm saying? And so, because that there's the show, the scared straight, what I mean?
Right.
But his thing was, scared great.
Right.
And I said, you do this and you're going to be scared straight. And I was like, but I never showed the audience that I messed up, because I was like, it is what it is.
Right.
I was feeling it. I was in the modes, but I think I just kind of took it more of like, if I come with my message and I don't mess up, I should be fine, because I know my ability. And as long as the people can feel it, I won't worry about whether or not I win or lose. And I think I get that mentality from me running track.
Sure.
Back in the day, you could work as hard as you can. I was a hard worker, but there were still people that were faster than me.
Right.
And so I just had to learn to run my own race. It's not about beating somebody else. It's about being the fastest that I could possibly be. And then whatever happens, happens. And I learned that from watching Usain Bolt versus Tyson Gay. Tyson Gay was super, super fast, but Usain Bolt was faster. But if it wasn't for Usain Bolt, Tyson Gay would be the fastest person in the world at that time. You know what I mean? But That doesn't mean that Tyson Gay was slow. He was just slower than Usain Bolt. And so I just had to run my own race.
Yeah. I don't know anything about that. I've always been slow. I've always been so slow. You know, it's messed up, man, too. People look at me. So like, I'm 6 feet tall. I put on some holiday weight. I'll be honest. Some holiday weight's on there right now. But for the majority of my life, I've been on the thinner side, right? And so people look at me and like, oh, that guy must be able to fly. Like when I was playing baseball, I was like, he must be able to fly. And I'm like, they'd see me run. It's like, geez, how slow. It's like I tell people all the time, like back in the day, I probably should have had so many home runs that turned into triples because I was just too slow to make it home. So
just to play it safe, man. That's it. Just play it safe.
That's what I'm gonna tell people. My coach knew. He saw me rounding second. He's like, he's not gonna make it home.
He said, just stay there. Just stay there.
Yeah, just like yeah. So it must be nice being fast, man. Do you still run all the time? Because I mean, track's kind of a weird thing. It's not like, I know people that did cross country, right? They can still go out, run 3, 4, 5. They do marathons. Track's a little bit different. Like, are you still out there? Do you put the spikes on sometimes and get on the track, or is that kind of over?
It's over. So I tore my Achilles after
Ooh.
college. Yeah, I was training actually to try to see if I can. My time improved by a whole second. I was a sprinter.
Okay.
My 100-meter time improved by a whole second from high school to college. And I really didn't start, even though I was on the team, I really didn't like give it my all until my senior year.
Got it.
Because I was just happy to be on the team and that was enough for me. But the senior year is like, I know I want to dominate this year. And so when I started taking it seriously, my time improved so much. So I was like, maybe I could try to improve it by another second and then, prior to go to the Olympics. When I tore my Achilles, that was pretty much the last of it for me. I was like, okay, it's over. It's done. So there's times where I can go out on the track and like do some track workouts and stuff. But I'm like you, man, I got that holiday weight, that COVID weight. And so it's that pandemic pounds is heavy right now.
Man, it is unkind. Well, so what is your, I know you would speak to anybody, and anybody that wanted to have you speak to their group, you would do it. But do you find that you have a specific group? Like, do you have like coaches and athletes that want you to come in and talk to their program? Do you have businesses? Do you have college groups? I know that you're, I think and correct me if I'm wrong, the guys on your podcast, are they guys you went to college with?
Yeah. Okay. So we all met in college, in undergrad at Chico State.
That's right, Chico State. So what kind of groups typically reach out to you and say, hey, we would love for you to come in and speak to us?
I would say typically it's colleges. Colleges and universities are the most. I have had some high schools. I haven't had too many like elementary schools at all. And I haven't had too many like business programs, but I have had like a couple of nonprofits as well too.
That's awesome.
I would say, but typically it's college and universities, and then it's the high schools, and then nonprofits are typically where most of mine. I'm looking to get out more into corporate, corporations and things like that. But right now, I think because I work at a college, it really helps because they already know, already have that relationship with you, and They already know you. And so it's a lot easier to bring on. Like I've spoken at a ton of different universities just in the past year alone. And it's been really helpful because I know the people before, and I did speak at, like I said, a couple of nonprofits too recently.
That's awesome, man. So I did, I don't speak like you guys, but I have spoken to some sports teams, like, smaller programs and stuff like that. There was one time I've done some stuff in my old high school. Some of them like smaller awards breakfasts where it was like, hey, you have 10 minutes, just do a quick thing and then we'll keep it moving. But they did ask me one time to do, I think they were doing testing for the sophomores and juniors. So seniors weren't on campus, but they wanted me to do this thing for freshmen. And this is like all these stuff, all the things that you learn about from Kevin Bracey. Like I did all the things wrong. And so like every single one, and I've taken his classes before. I just messed up on all of it, but I didn't realize how many people. It was 200 kids, 200 high school freshmen. And I'm like, it wasn't so much the number of people that freaked me out. It was the fact that these are 200 freshmen specifically. And I'll tell you what, man, talking to a group that big is tough. Like you have to be, that's where you learn, like you have to be really big in that setting, because it's not like you're talking to 25 to 30 athletes. You're talking to people that are like, I don't care who this dude is down there, and I don't want to listen to anything he has to say. I just want to go get my lunch and get out, talk to my friends. And so, man, a lot of respect to what you guys do and how you guys can go from a group of 30 to a group of 400, 500, and everything in between. Like it's a different thing for sure. So much respect to you guys as speakers who do that, because I won't do it again. It's not going to happen again. I was like, I'm doing a favor for the VP at that point, and I'm like, hey, I can't do this again, man. I can't.
Yeah.
Plus, he gave these kids donuts before I walked in. He had like all these boxes of donuts.
Ooh, they have
And
that energy. They bouncing around. Oh,
I'm like, what are those pink boxes? Like, oh, we just gave him donuts. Like, what? Why? So it's just one of those situations. And he told me, hey, we'd love for you to speak for 30 minutes. Well, by the time he did all of his stuff, it turned out to be like 15 minutes. So I had to cram. I prepared for 30 minutes. I'm trying to cram into 15. And because I'm not a seasoned speaker like you guys, that's trying to chop 15 minutes off your 30-minute speech is brutal.
That's tough. That's tough.
So I'm like, yeah, I'm going to leave it to the professionals like Josiah, Kevin, Dwight, and I'm just going to watch from the background, maybe film you guys do your thing and, just be done with it. Speaking of which, man, we did that the last time I saw you in person. We did we did some video work with Kevin. He was doing the rhythm and quotes, which was, man, still, I tell my wife still, like, that was one of the most fun things I've been a part of, because, and I hate to even try to describe it to people. Maybe you can do a better job of describing it, but the amount of energy in that room, because it was a music studio that we were in, and I was just filming all of it. The amount of energy that was in that room that day was wild. And the chemistry that you and Kevin had when you guys did your back and forth thing was amazing. Did you feel that in that moment?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's that thing was crazy.
Yeah. I'm like, it's weird. Like, him and I talked about it a little bit. We're like, okay, how's this going to look? What can we do? Who are you going to bring in to kind of be with you? And, you have all these ideas, but like, once you actually see it unfold, and I'm sure you feel the same way, anytime you have like a project, when you do your podcast, anything like that, once it's actually out there and done, it's like, oh, okay, this was pretty dope. I'm glad I was a part of this, because, that was just a lot. It was a lot of fun, and I don't know how much you had to prepare for that, but it was like, did that take a lot of preparation to get ready? Because especially, again, I don't know this. I have no rhythm at all. So I'm like, I'm watching you and Kevin go back and forth. I'm like, man. And the crazy thing too was, I was watching Kevin as I was setting the cameras up. I'm watching Kevin explain what he wanted to do, and you're just nodding. I'm like, I'm so lost right now. Like, Kevin lost me. Like, he's on like step 10. I lost it at 2, and you're just nodding the whole time. Like, all right, I guess Josiah's got it, and then just nailed it. First two takes. I was like, all right, this dude's impressive. So, do you guys have plans of doing anything else like that again soon?
Yeah. I think we're supposed to re-record it, to just to make it come out a little bit better. But I tell KB, just whenever you need me, call me. And I'll come through and make it happen. But it was just a beautiful experience. I think for me, like I said, I grew up on hip hop. My brother and I did gospel rap back in the day. So, anything that requires like a rhythm and some lyrics, I can make it work. I just have to, just give me a heads up or once I hear the beat, I'm like, all right, I can make this work, So really, it didn't really take much preparation for me. It was just, I think it took the longest to decide which quotes I wanted to use, because there's so many that are out there, and I never want to make it seem like one quote is more important than the other, because they're all more important, or they're all equally as important. It just, is it the right time for it? And so that took the longest. But once I heard the beat, I said, oh yeah, I'm gonna make it work.
So again, I guess I didn't realize that going into that that video shoot, that you had the hip hop background, which makes sense why you seem super comfortable when the beat started and you just jumped in. It's like, oh, he seems real comfortable with it. That makes sense. So let me ask you this, man. Do you still have any of your old music?
I do have it recorded. In fact, there's one of my guys, he does gospel music, and he's been asking me for a while to do a verse for him on his final album. And so
nice.
I told him, I'm like, I'm basically at this point when it comes to music, I said, I'm like the Andre 3000. Like, every few years you might get a verse from me. Like,
so,
you know what I'm saying?
someone has to do that, get that like Donda leak. Yeah.
Exactly. You know what I mean? That's how you can hear from me is like, but I've been rocking with him. Like we had a band together back in the day. So I was rocking with him for years. So I told him, I said, just let me know whenever you want me to, he lives in San Francisco. So let me know whenever you want me to come out, I'll record it, because I can write a verse pretty quickly. It's just, I just have, as long as I have the idea as far as what you're looking to pitch. I'm not one that can create my own song from scratch, but if you
Sure.
give me an idea or something that you want to focus on or something that you want to emphasize, I can come up with a verse pretty quickly.
That's awesome, man. I like that. If you're the Andre 3000 of your world, that's not a bad place to be. Especially, because I feel like, yeah, anytime
Humbly,
it's
I say that humbly though. Like I'm
you don't
not
have
trying to.
to.
Don't,
It's all
because then
good.
somebody gonna look up my old raps and be like, "This ain't Andre." No, no, I'm not saying I'm 3 stacks. I'm just saying like in regards to how little he comes out to do music. I
The
mean it with that.
frequency, the frequency.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll tell you what, man, that Life of the Party track was dope.
Oh, fire! He killed it. He killed
Yeah.
it.
I feel like he does kill it, but that one, it just felt like a different thing. Probably,
Yeah, he's
probably the
speaking
way it
from the
happened.
heart.
Yeah.
Speaking from the heart, man. Yeah, it was beautiful.
And just, yeah. And the creativity, the way he did it from the perspective he did it from, like, yeah, that whole thing was crazy.
Yeah.
Um, who are your biggest influences as far as music back when you were doing it?
I would say one of my biggest influences would be Jay Z.
Of course, right? Probably from the entrepreneurial standpoint too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, that entrepreneurial Jay Z is a mastermind. Like I love it. But yeah, so I would say Jay Z, old school Kanye West, old school 3000. Let's see who else. I also listen. I don't know if you listen to gospel rap back in the day, but there was a rapper called The Truth. He
Yeah.
was super influential. Ty Tribbett, loved his music. Yeah, so it was like that whole 116, all those guys from that particular
Yeah.
rap label was
Sure.
super huge and influential. So Flame and all those guys I listened to a lot. And then I would say my brother, he goes by J Truth. Him Rapture. I have a friend he's pretty big in the music industry now. He does beats. His name is Brandon P, but he used to go by Black Light.
Oh yeah, he's good
Uh,
friends with Dwight.
yeah,
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 yeah.
sure.
Yeah, in fact, he actually produced, I think, one of Dwight's one of his old albums before. So,
Okay, nice.
yeah. So we also listen to his music and get influenced by and inspired by that too.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I listened to all that stuff back in the day. In fact, I had this was back 2021, May of 2021. Show Baraka was on the show.
Oh wow,
Yeah, yeah. He's my favorite. Like I've loved his
wow,
music, like my favorite artist by a long shot. And yeah, he was kind enough to join the show. That was a cool moment for me.
that's dope. I gotta check that one out. I gotta
Yeah,
check
man.
that for sure.
I forgot what which episode that was, but it's a little ways back. But yeah, I would like to reach out to him again because it was a fun episode. He's just an amazing dude. Um,
Nice.
but anyways, I could talk about that forever. But yeah, no, it's interesting. Like it's interesting how with artists or even speaking, when you have all these influences, right? You're listening to this stuff all the time. You're listening to speakers all the time. Sometimes, like especially when you're new in something, how easy it is to start. Because we always talk about like imitation versus inspiration, and how
Mm-hmm.
easy when you're first starting. It's just like that's what I worried about with this podcast. Because I listened to so many podcasts for so many years. When I first started podcasting, I'm like, I just gotta make sure that I don't sound just like just naturally kind of take a style of someone that I love, right?
Yeah.
Is that something you ever had to deal with, whether it be music or speaking? Like, did you ever find yourself going, it's like, you know what? I sound exactly like this person. I got to switch it up a little bit. It's too close.
Yeah, I would say that there are times where I find myself sounding a little bit too much like ET. ET he's a dope speaker,
Yeah,
but there are times where like I felt that I was kind of sounding too much like him. So
sure.
I tried to tell myself, like even though I'm inspired by this, maybe ET's already ET. They
Right.
don't need another ET, but I need to be myself. And so there's times like, for instance, we do the Wise Word Wednesdays that we do every week.
Right.
There are times where like I have to re-record it because I said, you know what, this sounds too much like such and such, or this sounds too much like that. And so you want to be yourself. And so there are times where I have to do that for sure.
I'm glad you brought up the Wise Word Wednesday. So, is you do it? I mean, I think you do it every Wednesday, right? Like you've been pretty consistent with it for a long time.
Yeah, 6 years. 6 years.
Dang, 6 years, that long?
Yes, yeah.
That's a lot of talking. So how do you,
Yeah.
man, because I've had to record, not so much for this podcast, but my other podcast, I've had to record some solo episodes where I'm talking anywhere between 15 and 20 minutes. And I'm thinking like, what am I going to talk about? It's a little bit easier because it's a podcast, but how do you constantly come up with things to say on Wednesday? Is it just stuff that comes up in life, or do you have, like, how do you constantly, I mean, 6 years, that's a lot of Wednesdays.
A lot.
A lot
It's
of
a lot.
Wednesdays. So what's that creative process like for you when it comes to putting out those Wednesday messages?
So, the purpose of Wise Word Wednesday is kind of going back to the point that you made earlier, when you talked about, being authentic, right? And being able to, own up to your mistakes and things that you've done. And really that's kind of what it was based off of. It was like, hey, listen, I'm not perfect. We're not perfect. I know on social media, people try to only hold, show their best sides or their best selves. But we understand that we've made mistakes. We're all human. And so if we could just tell people things that we've learned throughout our life, whether it be from a personal experience, from something you heard, or something that a friend told you, or whatever that you witnessed, but be able to provide somebody with some insight on a particular thing, so that way if they do go through that thing and they hear your message, they're able to, one, know that they're not the only person that's gone through that, but then two, maybe be able to not make the same mistake that you made when you went through that particular circumstance. And so it's really one of those humbling things, because every week is different. So sometimes, like, I go to my my notes on my iPhone, and I have at least 150 to 200 different Wise Word Wednesday quotes, some of which that I've used and some of I haven't. Like, it's just different times. If I'm sitting down at a church service and I hear somebody say something dope, oh, I'll write that down immediately. That could be a Wise Word Wednesday. And I may not look at it until a year later and say, oh, I want to do this. But most Wednesdays, it's just, straight, what am I feeling right
Sure.
now? How am I feeling right now? What did I learn this week, or what do I want to focus on? But then there are some, Wednesdays where I just don't want to do it. And so those are the days where I go to those notes and say, okay, I don't feel like doing it. Let me see if I can get some inspiration, or feel like I read something and that kind of resonates with me. Let me speak on that particular thing. So it really does vary, depending on my mood or the circumstances. And I just want to keep it real. I've been doing it for 6 years, every single week. I only missed 1 week in the first year, because I think it was like the 4th of July or something like that. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to do it on a holiday.
Sure.
And then I regretted it. After that, I said, no matter what, I don't care what holiday or whatever it is, I'm going to do it. So for 6 years, I don't want to make it seem like as if I'm always this super up, super energetic, high, positivity kind of person. Like, I'm a human being. There are times where I go through some ups and downs. Like these past 2 years, I know 18 people that lost their life, and so there are downs for sure. But in those tough times, I tell myself, Kevin Bracey said he grinded it out for 14 years before he started to really see a breakthrough. So for me, out of respect to somebody that I personally know who went through the trials and became successful, I owe it to him, out of respect for what he's gone through, to at the bare minimum give this 14 years. And then after that, if I decide I don't want to do Wise Word Wednesdays anymore, that's fine. But I, at least out of respect for what I know somebody else has done, and I know that somebody else has laid out the blueprint, I can do it. And that means that in those 14 years that he was grinding, there were times that he didn't want to grind anymore. There was times where he didn't want to be successful anymore. He didn't feel like doing it anymore. Maybe I could just go back to doing whatever I'm used to, but he still stuck through it. And so I have to do that out of respect for him.
Yeah. That's a great outlook. Like, I love that mindset, because it gives an extra, when you always hear, right, Eric Thomas talk about like, what's your why, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of gives it gives that extra boost, or that extra motivation you need in those moments when you don't feel like you have the energy, when you don't feel like you want to do it. It's one thing to say like, well, I just got to do it because it's taking me where I'm trying to go. I mean, that's great. That's good. That's good motivation. But when you attach another person's sacrifice to it,
Mm-hmm.
that's like an extra motivation. And so
Yeah.
I think that's a really smart way of looking at that, because, um, I mean, like I say, I keep saying it, but 6 years is a long time. And so for you to stay consistent, minus just missed one day, but even the one day that was even intentional, right? Like you said, I'm not gonna do it on a holiday, rather than I'm just like, I don't feel like doing it. Like, so
Right.
even that, I know you're your harshest critic, but like even that's, you still made the decision not to do it, rather than just I'm just lazy today.
Yeah.
Um,
I will say there is one week that I did do two random. I was just feeling it super. So I did do two. So technically, if you average it out, I did it every
you're all
week for the
good.
past 6 years.
Hey, we're gonna count it then. It's still good. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
it fills in the gap there. Man, yeah, no, it's cool. Well, it's interesting too, because I've watched quite a few of them, and obviously, um, kind of going in a more serious direction. Like there have been some you've done that are, and this kind of goes back to like what I asked you about feeling the responsibility amongst your community, amongst your friends and family, when different social situations happen, right? Whether it be, I mean, the first one that comes to mind, like George Floyd, right? I'm pretty sure you did one surrounding that situation and everything else that was going on.
Mhm.
I mean, those are the ones that's like you feel like you have to do, like you have to speak on it for the community, for anybody who's attached to you who wants to hear your perspective on it. But man, it's not a fun one to do. It's not an easy one to do.
Not at all. Not at
Yeah,
all. It again, it's that responsibility, but it's also, it's genuine and it's authentic.
sure.
It's what I'm feeling. Um, and then it's also important because, if that was me, I would want as many people to talk about it to make sure that they're aware of, what's just,
Right.
and what's fair, what's right.
Yeah.
And so, we look back all the time, and we can look back at history. I mean, there was just a picture of Jerry Jones that just recently,
Right.
resurfaced from 57 years ago or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when people look back at history now, I know that I'm not going to be seen as perfect because I'm not perfect, but at least for, on things that I thought was just and right, I'm able to say I spoke out and spoke up, not because I want people to see that I spoke up, but because I genuinely thought that it was the right thing to do. And I'm okay with, if it's the wrong thing, if 15, 20, 100 years ago, I mean, from now we find out that I spoke out and it was the wrong thing, I'm okay to say, my bad. I apologize. Teach me,
Sure.
and because we're all human. So I'm not, absent of mistakes.
Right. Well, I'm sure the people around you appreciate it as well too, because one, they get to hear your perspective on different topics, whether it's something as serious as that, or maybe it's just like a normal life thing, everyday life thing. But I think people get to hear that, and it's probably, I mean, I think you're speaking for other people that maybe don't have the same platform that you do, or I'm sure you've gotten a lot of messages saying, "Man, I didn't realize that someone else felt the same way. Like I'm going through that same thing." And
Yeah.
so, even going back to like your injury, right? Like your track injury and your Achilles injury, I'm sure some people learn that. It's like, oh man, like it gives a different gives a different layers when they hear you speak, right? Because there's like another level of connection with you. And so that's, I mean, again, that's one of the cool things about these wise word Wednesdays, is that I feel like they're getting to know you, and they should know you pretty well by now. And I'm sure there's so many more layers to who you are, but like anybody who follows you is like, okay, we're getting a lot of um, a lot of information about your life, a lot of information about how you see the world, your perspective, and all of that. And I think it probably just adds to your speaking, I would imagine.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
it does. It makes one heck of a story.
yeah, absolutely, man. So I got to ask before we get out of here, man. I don't want to keep you too long. I want to be respectful of
Sure.
your time. But before we get out of here, I've got to ask you two things. Let's start with your hat, man. Fire your boss. Like, how did that whole thing
Yes.
start? First of all, you guys have merch. That's pretty dope.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have any merch for this podcast. We've been doing this
Not
for
yet. You ain't got it yet.
not yet. We're working on it.
Working
It's
on it.
slow but sure. But you
There
have
we
the
go.
hats. You have the hats,
Yeah.
and you have the whole fire your boss thing. Like, explain to me a little bit about what that is, what that means to you, and why you started. I mean, I don't know if it's really, I don't know what you would call it. It's not an organization. Is it a movement? Like, what would you define it as?
I would define it honestly as a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle change. And so, what we try to teach people is that, there's nobody more important to you than you. It starts with yourself. Too many times I think that we believe that we can't accomplish something without the approval or direction of somebody else. But, we try to teach people that you're your own boss. You're responsible for whatever happens, in your life. And I talked about this in a Wise Word Wednesday recently, where I said, because my pops actually sent this to me. It was a video where this woman said, you're born looking like your parents, but you'll die looking like your decisions, looking like your choices. And so, we teach people that, you are where you are, because of the decisions that you've made. And if you stay in that position, that's on you. You know what I mean? And so we try to teach people, understand how important you are first, before you think about the millions of dollars, before you think about the great job, the nice car, the amazing house, the great dad, the great mom, whatever it is. First, be a great you. And then you can, whatever you do, it will attract to you. You know what I mean? The things that you truly desire, but it starts with being your best self. And I think it took me a while to realize that, because I was doing things because I wanted to get this, I want to get that, so let me do that. But when I started walking in my purpose and walking in what I was called to do, things just started finding their way to me, like great jobs, great opportunities, speaking engagements. I met KB because I was walking in my purpose. But if I would have been chasing a dream that was meant to get a specific, tangible, goal, like a car, right? Then I would have, maybe I would have been successful at it, but I don't know. But I know I wouldn't have been happy. Right now, it doesn't matter how much money I get, even though we do plan on becoming billionaires. That's the goal long term, At the end of the day, I'm happy doing what I do. And so it doesn't feel like I have to work. I choose to work.
Right. I like that. What's the meaning behind the penguin?
Yeah, so we love the penguin because, penguins are very interesting. So when they're in the water, when other fish or dolphins or animals look up, they can't see the penguin because it has the white stomach. It looks like the sky. And for people who are flying, when they look down, they can't see the penguin because it looks like the black, it looks like the sea. So they really blend in. And that's kind of the thing that we wanted to do. Like, our job isn't really just to stand out. And that's, we do have merchandise, but we only drop it a very, very like so and so often. We may drop like 5 hats here. We drop 10 hats here, because our goal isn't to be like, yo, we want it everywhere. It's just like, yo, we blend in, but we are different in our own unique way.
That's awesome. So when I started this specific podcast, I was trying to, come up with different artwork and stuff like that. And for some reason I thought, hey, it'd be cool to have like this gorilla with headphones on. It made no sense. Now, hearing what you just said about that penguin makes me feel like crap. I'm like, that's what, and anybody who knows, whether it be my wife, my brother, they know the gorilla story. They're going to hear that. It's like, that's exactly why we told you not to use that stupid, gorilla, because you had no meaning behind it. That's a dope. I love that penguin story, man. That's awesome. And then if people can't see it, so it's a penguin on the hat with FYB on the front, and then also a crown on the penguin, I believe. Or no, it's a hat.
Yeah. He's got the beanie on there.
Oh, it's a beanie. It's a beanie.
Yeah.
I always thought it was a Christmas hat.
Our logo typically does have a crown.
Okay, I thought okay, I knew that was somewhere. I'm like, I'm not completely off there. So usually has the crown on the penguin. So that's dope, man. I love that. It's the podcast.
Yes.
How long have you been podcasting for? A couple of years, right?
Yeah. So I think we started this back in 2019 or something like, or 18 maybe. It's funny because like the group of guys, myself, DT, Reese, Steve, we've been great friends for a decade plus. And so we've been podcasting, we just didn't record it. We talk all the time. We have good opinions, and I think podcast just gives us an opportunity to put a microphone and record it and give it to the masses. But we started this a couple years ago. It is challenging because when you're working with a lot of people, that's a lot. It's 4 different schedules. And then if you have a guest, that's 5. And then like the last podcast we dropped had 8 total people. Jeez. So that's 8 edits, right? Like, you know what I mean? I had editing and I did all that myself, So it was challenging, but it's been beautiful because of the different perspectives that we get with the amount of people that we have. And we all, some people from Sacramento, some people from Antioch, some from Oakland, me from Richmond. It's like you get different perspectives and insight, and it's been beautiful. So I'm glad that we have the opportunity to be able to share with people. We're going to record another episode this weekend, actually.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you've had some really good guests on there, and it is, like I said, it is a cool dynamic. I mean, I can't even imagine. I mean, like you said, I have a co-host. She's not here, so it's actually, you know, that's just two of us, and sometimes I have a tough time scheduling podcasts with her. I'm not even going to get into that because our audience is like, we've heard this complaint so many times. But you're 100% right. Like, just the challenge of scheduling a guest and then making sure everybody's schedules line up is tough. And if you do that, and then the editing on top of that, you do that with 8 people that one episode, that's wild.
Yeah. So it's challenging. Right now we're looking for a virtual assistant, because I just told the group, I said I can't do it. I can't do the editing. I'm just, because with the motivational speaking, the Wise Word Wednesdays, I work full time, and then I was in school. I just got my master's, so all these things that I was
Congrats.
kind of juggling. I'm like, look, all right, spending 20 hours doing the podcast edits is just not going to work for me right now. So we're going to hire somebody soon. But it is a blessing. It's really challenging. And for me, I'm a perfectionist. I'm like, yo, it has to be everybody every time, or I can't do it. And it's like, I have to learn that sometimes you have to just keep the show going. Maybe you only have 2 people one episode, or maybe you only have 1 person. So I commend you on being able to do that, because for me, that's just been the challenge. It's like, no, if it doesn't come out right, then it don't need to come out. And it's like, no, just keep going, keep moving.
Yeah, no, it is a challenge. I'm similar. There's definitely been episodes where it's I've let up a little bit, but early on, I mean, we would record for like an hour and a half, and it's like we have to scrap that whole thing. That whole thing is trash. And then it's like, man, and then now it's like, okay, it's just one of those things where you, like, kind of like we said about speaking, right? Like, you do it, there's gonna be mistakes, there's gonna be, things that happen. I've let it go a little bit. There have definitely been episodes where I'm trying to think of excuses, like, how can I get rid of this episode, because this one's not very good. And haven't done it too much, but yeah, man, and all, like you said, the editing, yeah, good for you, man. That virtual assistant is gonna be a game changer. That's gonna be awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's brutal. But explain the name. So it's an IIV League podcast.
Yeah. So
explain the name a little bit.
So we said we call it like Ivy League,
Yeah.
Is what we call it. And so we tried, because we wanted to really talk about higher level conversations. When people talk about, Ivy League, they think of, the top prestigious schools. Sure. And so we wanted to come with that perspective, even though, none of us attended Ivy League, universities, but we understood that the level of thinking that we had, and we understood this before we even officially started the podcast, just us, the conversations that we had. And this is kind of why, our group is so tight, because we were having these conversations for so long. And we realized that we are different, even though we hang out with a lot of people at times, we go to different events and things like that. Just like we said, we blend in, but we also still stand out. And so it's important, for us to let people know that, listen, we're not just going to talk about the basic perspective. We're going to show you an elevated perspective of people who are coming from, single parent households, college degree, not college degree, work experience. Like for me, I have a huge family. I had 10 siblings, whereas to DT, he is an only sibling, so we have a different perspective in how we view the world, and we're not afraid to talk to each other and challenge each other's views on what we think, and to question in order to learn. So we really wanted to do that. And so we came with IIV because it was technically, it's like a fake Roman numeral for 3, because sure. Really it's like the 3 slashes, but it was like IV, it's kind of like a play on words, yeah. So and the 3 is, for the FYB. And so, that's where we got that name from.
See, that's the artist in you, man. Thinking of all the meaning, all the symbolism, putting it all together. I love that, man. That's awesome. And it's cool. I love the idea of having different people from different backgrounds, different opinions, different perspectives, because, obviously that's where the most valuable conversation is going to happen, in those spaces. And, it just hit me too, man. I love the fact, and I don't know if you did this intentionally, but sometimes if you have a favorite content creator or a favorite speaker or musician, if they just do music, like you get to see them when they perform their music, you get to listen to their music, and that's kind of just the version of them that you know. Sometimes with a speaker, you might like, no, I don't want this to sound bad about Eric Thomas, but like what you see of Eric Thomas live is basically what you get when he's on YouTube on his videos or Instagram. It's kind of the same guy. But for
Mm-hmm.
you though, you're the same guy, but people are getting like three or four different versions of you. Like they get to see different parts of who you are. Like they see you, the speaker on stage. They see you on the Wise Words Wednesdays. They see you with your group of friends on your podcast, and they're all versions or parts of you, same person. But it's like I imagine that if someone follows you, they have a very clear idea of who you are because they get to see you in these different areas and these different arenas, which is kind of a cool thing, man. It's not one dimensional, right? They don't think of you as, oh, he's just like the speaker all the time. They get to see you in all these different arenas. Is that something you did intentionally? Do you like the idea of people being able to see different parts of you? And here's the thing too. Before I'll stop talking and let you speak.
You good?
Um, it's interesting too because the bottom line is just like when you played sports, there's coaches that you might vibe with more, right? Like, man, I don't connect real well with the head coach, but there's a couple of assistant coaches that I get along really well with. Another athlete might be like, man, I love the head coach. I don't connect as well with the assistant coaches. It's kind of the same thing. Like they may not have a chance to see you speak, but they can see a Wise Word Wednesday every Wednesday and still connect with you in that way. And maybe that's the best way for them to connect with your message. So it's just interesting that you have so many different, branches on this tree of who you are. So is that intentional, or, do you even think about that when you're putting content out?
I don't know if I wouldn't say it's intentional. I would say that it I think I'm just super multifaceted. I don't, not to be, again, in the most humble way. I think that, God has given me a variety of different gifts. And I think part of that probably comes from, my childhood of moving around so much. I went to four different high schools, four
Sure.
different elementary schools, and one middle school and two colleges. I mean, that's literally, I think, what, 12, 11 or 12 different places that I had to invent myself and to prove
Right.
myself, and so
Right.
I think that there were different places where, okay, might move somewhere here and this person may be better at playing the piano, so I need to figure out how to rap, or this person's a better rapper, so I need to figure out how to sing. This person, so it's a variety of different things. And honestly, I want to say again, in the humblest of ways, it reminds me of Tupac. They said that,
Mm.
Tupac, depending on how you met him, that was the version you got. You might have saw Thug Tupac, you might have saw acting Tupac, you
Yeah.
might have saw rapper Tupac, you might have saw Tupac the poet, you might have saw Tupac the activist. So it really just kind of depends. So I kind of liken it to that. And I didn't, again, me looking at it now, in hindsight, I can see, the similarities in that sense. It's like, depend on where you see me. If you see me out, on a regular day, you might see me dressed in a business suit, but you see me at, for the podcast, I'm rocking a hat and some a hoodie or something like
Right.
that. Wise Word Wednesdays, you're gonna get the motivation, the inspiration. So I think it just depends. It's a blessing that I do have many talents that I'm able to utilize to my benefit, because not a lot of people can say that they can do music and speak publicly and do editing for a podcast, and what I mean, all these
Right.
different things. Some people just struggle at just one of those, and so the beautiful thing is I get to be good at a lot of things. The terrible thing is I never get to be great at one thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's yeah, that's always the dilemma, right? When you're
Yeah.
good at so many things, it's tough to hone in on that. But no, that makes sense. I appreciate that answer, man. And I want to let you know too, just out of respect for you, because I like you, man. So I want to make sure you're not blindsided by this. I'm definitely gonna post something as a clickbait saying that he compared himself to Tupac and Andre 3000. So just so you know, I gotta get the clicks. So I'm gonna put that out
It's
there.
all good. I love it. I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
it. No doubt.
I'll put together the most humble answer in the video, but the thumbnail is gonna be like, can you
I
believe
love it.
this? Yeah, one of those types of things.
No doubt. No doubt. Holla at me in the comments, y'all. Tell me what y'all think. Tell them.
There we go. Perfect. Hey man, you gotta get those views up. So
No doubt. No doubt.
Um, well, hey man, this has been awesome. Like I said, I could talk to you for a lot longer, but I want to make sure I'm respectful of your time. So, anything else you want to leave the people with? Any final thoughts? Anything, besides where they can find you on social media and all that stuff? Any final thoughts, messages you want to share with everybody?
I think that what I'm learning, in this journey of life is that um, social media or the internet is going to be, it's a digital footprint, and it's really really important that we do a better job in understanding the magnitude of the things that we post, and the things that we put out there, because 100 years from now you're going to be judged based on that. And I'm not saying that you're a good person or a bad person, because we're all just humans trying to learn and understand. There's right and there's wrong. But I do think that it's important for us as a society to know that the things that we post, people may interpret differently 100 years from now. Just like, again, I referenced the Jerry Jones thing, not to call him anything, but just to say that that is a timestamp. Now imagine what people are going to say about us 60 years from now. So it's important just to be cautious of what you do post online. I love the movement that KB has, where he's talking to young kids about thinking about what you post before you post it. But just understand that this stuff is written forever, and it's going to be very very challenging to have to explain to an employer or to a company or to an organization that you want to partner with about that one thing that you posted. Just ask yourself, is it worth it? And don't be afraid to take time away from social media so that you can get yourself right. There's nothing, I literally log out of Instagram on a daily basis. I log out. I only go in there typically Wise Word Wednesdays, or if I'm like, let me check my messages just to see if someone responded, and then I have to log out. So be mindful of your time, because every minute that you spend doing one thing is a minute that you're not spending doing another. And so if your goal is to be the greatest version of yourself, it's going to take a lot of time. So if you're spending 4 or 5 hours a day on Instagram, that's 4 or 5 hours a day that you could have spent doing something that you're great at. And this isn't for the people who are just, doing things, because I post on Instagram too. So I'm just saying, of course, there's benefits to it, but just be aware of that. That's all.
Yeah, that's
fresh.
I love it. Yeah, there you go. I love that. And whether this was intentional or unintentional, you've convinced me not to post the Andre 3000 Tupac comparison. Well done.
No, do it, man.
I can't leave that. No, I can't leave that digital footprint on you. You know what I mean? Or that thumbprint. Can't do it. Well done. You convinced me.
Yeah, you never know, man. In 10 years, that thing might get a lot of clicks, because they'll be like, remember back in 2022 when he said this? Go ahead and post it, man.
There we go. I'm going to do it. No. Man, this has been awesome. This is fun, man. I enjoy talking to you as always. Where can people follow you? Where can they get the podcast, websites, anything that you got, man? YouTube. I don't know if you got a YouTube page where they can catch some of your speaking clips, like all of that. Let us have it.
Yeah, so on YouTube, it's Wise Word Wednesdays. So you can type that in, and you'll find the different Wise Word Wednesdays. You'll also find our Ivy League podcast on that YouTube channel. You can also for our podcast, it's Ivy League, so IIV and then League, like Justice League. So Ivy League, you find that on any type of streaming podcast platforms. You can follow me on at JOSPYDA_FYB. Sorry, my dog is crying. He's ready to go out to the restroom. I don't know if you can hear him in the background.
Oh, no. No, not at all.
So yeah, JOSPYDA_FYB. And you can also follow our Fire Your Boss page, which is _ Fire Your Boss on Instagram. It's a blessing to be here. I have a whole team that really puts in a lot of work. I know that sometimes it seems like it's just me, but I promise you it's not. It's a whole team of people who are really focused on how can we help make everyone a little bit better.
I love it, man. Hey, well, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate everything you're doing. Thank you so much for taking some time to talk with me and share just some thoughts with our audience, man. We appreciate you, and we'll have to have you back on sometime. Maybe we'll have you back on when Deb's finally decides to show up. So
I'm down. I appreciate you, Deb. It's all good.
All right, man. Hey, take care of that dog.
All right, we'll do.
All right, man. We'll see you. Thanks for watching the show. If you enjoyed that episode, make sure you like it, share it, and hit the subscribe button to get a new episode every week. We'll see you next time on the Connectable Podcast.